Today I'm going to tell you which states are leading the charge and dragging the country down in the poverty department. That's right, we're looking at the states that have the highest rate of poverty here in 2023. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the national poverty rate was 12.4% in 2022, and that's up from 11.2% in 2021. Here in 2023, it's dropped down to about 11.5% most of the year. We got 6 weeks left in the year, but that's probably what it'll end up being at the end of the year. Most of the states on this list should be no surprise if you know anything about what's going on in the country, but I'm sure a few will surprise you. I was surprised that a couple actually made the list this year. In the comment section down below, let me know which one surprised you the most and which one didn't surprise you at all. This video is about the percentage of people in each state that are living below the poverty line. And it's easy just to say it's their fault. These people are poor because they did something wrong. That isn't 100% true. Who and how your state is running plays a big part in things like poverty and crime. Sure, we all bear some responsibility to our situation, but if your elected officials don't make the right moves to bring jobs to a state, what are you gonna do? The whole state can't pick up and move to the next state over. And if some people do move, that may fix their situation, but doesn't fix the situation of a state. Today, we look at the states that have the highest poverty rates and which counties in each of those have the most poverty. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Texas. Texas, with its vast size and booming cities like Houston, Dallas, often give off this vibe of wealth and prosperity. But surprisingly, there's another side to Texas that struggles with poverty. Part of the reason lies in the state's massive income inequality and tax system that, let's say, not exactly friendly to the less fortunate. On top of that, Texas has a big rural area where job opportunities aren't exactly growing on trees, and the educational system in many parts of the state could really use some TLC. High school graduation rates and college degree holders are lower than the national average in some areas, which doesn't help when it comes to landing good paying jobs. And big tech firms and big companies in general really don't move to areas that don't have a, educated workforce that often these days. 1940s, 50s, and 60s, that was fine because farming used a lot more people than it does now. So rural communities did a lot better. So what's the fix? What will get Texas over this hump? First things first, Texas needs to tackle its education shortcomings like a sumo wrestler with a tapeworm tackles a plate of barbecue. Investing in schools, especially in the underserved areas, and making college more accessible and affordable could be a game changer for this state. The downside is this would take, 10, 15 years to really show that it's working. And most politicians want to see things happen today. They don't think about the future. They think about the next 4 years when they have to get reelected. Nobody thinks 20 years down the line anymore. They've also got a really high rate of uninsured when it comes to healthcare. They need to tackle that too. Because when people are uninsured, they end up getting massive healthcare bills, or they can't work because they're dealing with some medical issues they can't get taken care of. And to be honest, that's a serious recipe for financial disaster for families. Overall, 14% of Texas lives below the poverty line, and in the poorest county, which is B County, as in BEE, 27% of their population lives below the poverty line. Number 9, New York. I had no idea New York would show up on this list. A few years ago we did it, and I think it was in the, 19 or 20. New York's struggles with poverty is a complicated issue, deeply rooted in a mix of economic, social, and political factors. One of the main reasons is the high cost of living, especially when you look at New York City. Everything from rent to a carton of milk can be super expensive, making it tough for lower income and middle income families to keep up. There's also a serious income gap in this state. In New York City, you have some of the richest people on the planet. Go 3 miles away and you find some of the poorest people on the planet, or at least a whole bunch of people struggling to make ends meet day after day. Now, in New York and New York City especially, you'll always find jobs for people. People always have jobs. The downside is the cost of living and the cost of housing in places like New York City are so high that the average person needs to make like $60 an hour to just get by. Or you gotta have 4 roommates in a 1-bedroom apartment and eat top ramen 4 nights a week. Now, how can they fix the problems that they have in New York State and New York City? Now, I keep saying New York City too, because that's where a majority of the people will live and that's where a majority of the problems are. But getting things fixed in New York, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal, but there are some areas that they can focus on. First of all, affordable housing needs to be more than just a buzzword. The city and the state need to invest and develop housing that's actually affordable for average New Yorkers, not just luxury condos. Education and job training is also crucial. People need the right skills to tap into better paying jobs. It's not just all about college degrees. Trade schools can do an incredible amount of good for a community. I mean, for all of us. That's something I've told my kids and just about anyone that'll listen, that trade schools are a decent option. Sure, if you can get into Harvard on a scholarship, by all means, take the scholarship. But there is no shame in going to a trade school and having a decent job. When you get that decent job, maybe work on a degree. Rome wasn't built in a day. All the different steps that New York State and any state needs, it does take time. Like I said about Texas, they're not going to see the return on investment next year or maybe even the next year. It might take 4, 5, 6, maybe 10, 15 years to really see the impact of job training and better housing opportunities. 14.3% of the people living in the Empire State live below the poverty line, and the poorest county is Bronx County with 21% of the people living below the poverty line. Number 8, Oklahoma. Oklahoma gets on this list because of poverty, and it's got another distinction. It also leads the country and the highest rate of people on public assistance. But their land is cheap, so that's a plus. Oklahoma's poverty is rooted in a mix of historical, economic, and social factors. For starters, the state's economy has been heavily dependent on oil and natural gas sectors. The reliance on a few industries can be a double-edged sword. When the energy sector booms, the state is doing great. When there's a downturn, the whole state starts to look like the Great Depression. Oklahoma has also traditionally invested less in education than just about any other state. This can limit opportunities for residents, especially in a world where good education is increasingly linked to better job prospects and economic growth. So how do they fix it? Again, you got to invest in schools. You got to kind of diversify, which they are. I just did a video and I was doing a lot of reading on how they're getting into other industries. I wouldn't say pulling away, but they're not just focusing on oil and gas and agriculture. Different technologies, renewable energy starting to come about in Oklahoma, as is healthcare. Healthcare is going to be a big industry for them in the coming years. So that might help. And if that is the case, that also shows there's a need for different trade schools. Not everyone in the healthcare industry is a doctor or a nurse. Again, none of these are overnight solutions, but you got to start somewhere. And they have a little bit with the changing economy, but they need to do more. Because right now, 15.7% of Oklahoma's population lives below the poverty line. Their poorest county is Choctaw County, which is 29% of their population living below the poverty line. And I'm being generous there. I found one other study that said it was closer to 40%. Number 7, Alabama. Alabama's got a serious history of poverty. I mean, all the way back to the beginning of the state's inception. And I'd like to say they have a history of poverty, but really they have a history of stupidity, and I'm talking about their elected officials. They just have, time after time, elected the wrong people. The people are amazing people. They know how to have a good time. That's one thing I will give Alabama. I've never met one person from Alabama that was boring. But historic, economic, and educational factors play into their poverty. They have a lot of the things other states on this list have had, like education and, history of socioeconomic problems. But their biggest problem throughout their history is their reliance on agriculture as an industry. And as farming started to use fewer and fewer farmhands or whatever else, just lack of agricultural jobs, they didn't transition quick enough. And now they're behind the curve. They're trying to recover, and they're doing a lot of really good things. A lot of smart people come out of Alabama. They were just slow to make changes. Now, these days, they're really focusing on education, which is great. And healthcare, data rooms, and insurance companies are really starting to employ a lot of people in this state. I think their situation will change within the next 5 to 10 years. They'll at least maybe move out of the top 10. But right now they're at number 7, with 16.2% of their population living below the poverty line. Their poorest county is Perry County, where 51% of their population lives below the poverty line. And about 20% of them are considered in severe poverty. Number 6, Kentucky. This is another state that has a long history of poverty. And part of that is the industries that they've been into. I mean, most of their industries are bad for you. Coal, which kind of faded away. Tobacco, which is slowly fading away. And of course, moonshine. Just kidding. Moonshine is a big deal in Kentucky, or it used to be. And a lot of people made a lot of money on the black market from it, but it really didn't employ a lot of people. The two sectors that played a big role in the history of Kentucky were coal and tobacco. As we know, tobacco got linked to cancer, and down went the tobacco industry. And as the demand for coal plummeted due to environmental concerns and cheaper alternatives, many Kentuckians lost their primary source of income. This wasn't the only state in this area of the country that felt that pinch. A lot of the people that were working those jobs were considered rural people. They didn't have alternatives once the coal mines started closing down. I watched a documentary on the coal industry, and one of the guys had an interesting point that a lot of the politicians really did a disservice to these communities. They kept making these promises of coal coming back and the industry is going to start booming again. Now, there is still a coal industry and there will always be a need, but it's never going to be what it used to be. And he said that these politicians make these promises that it's going to come back when the politicians knew it wasn't coming back. They were just trying to get elected. And these people believed it and they hoped and they kept voting for these pro-coal politicians. I mean, it would be great if it could. That'd be wonderful. Coal's bad for the environment, but I think most of us know it's only half as bad as they want to make it sound. Whatever side of any issue you are on, the so-called experts on either side of anything are going to tell you the absolute worst case scenario. That's their job. They're selling something. They're selling an idea or a theory to the masses. One of the greatest teachers I ever had in my life, his name was Mr. Picard. He was a public speaking or speech teacher. And he said, if one expert tells you something's black and another expert tells you something's white, it's safe to assume it is a shade of gray. Or they're both wrong and 10 years down the road you realize it's green. Now, what can Kentucky do to fix this situation? Well, they need to get into other industries. They need to jump on the healthcare boom and the technology boom and get things going in the right direction. I don't think they've made as big of an effort to do things like that as they should, but they are getting a lot of infrastructure money right now. So that'll bring some money into the state and a lot of jobs. So we'll see. Right now, 16.5% of Kentucky's population lives below the poverty line. Their poorest county is Wolfe County, and 44% of their residents live below the poverty line. Number 5, Arkansas. Hey look, our old friend Arkansas is on the list. I had a guy just recently send me an email telling me all about how Arkansas is not nearly as bad as I claim it to be, and I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about. And yeah, most of his whole email was poor grammar and misspelled words, including calling me dude spelled D-O-O-D. Arkansas, bless its heart, has been struggling with poverty for quite some time, and there's a bunch of reasons for it, but we'll just look at a few of them. First of all, the state's economy is heavily reliant on agriculture and low-wage industries. This means many folks are stuck in jobs that don't pay much, even if they do happen to have a job. There's just not enough high-paying job opportunities to go around. Now, obviously, like I've said in many videos before, the northwest corner of the state is totally different from the rest of it, but we're talking about the entire state of Arkansas, and it sucks when it comes to wages. The state's beautiful, though. If they could just bottle up their nature and push it a little bit more on people, they could have quite a little nest egg there, but right now they don't. Plus, education in Arkansas hasn't been the strongest, which makes it tough for people to get the skills they need for better paying jobs if one does happen to arise. It's kind of a catch-22 situation. The economy needs skilled workers to grow, but people need better jobs so they can afford to pay for those skills. So what can Arkansas do to turn things around? Well, it's like fixing an old truck. It's going to take some time and effort. Investing in education is key. The state needs to pump out more resources into the schools and colleges, making sure they're top-notch and accessible to everyone in the state, not just some people, everyone. Now, they still have big roots in agriculture, and that's great. In recent years, they've started moving towards green energies, and I think that could be the future. They just need to get the people skilled up for these jobs. Right now, 16.8% of Arkansas lives below the poverty line, and their poorest county is Phillips County. 46% of the people in Phillips County live below the poverty line. Number 4, New Mexico. New Mexico's another place that's just been poor since forever, and nobody lives there. It's really strange. Arizona is right next door to New Mexico. It's roughly the same size as far as land goes, pretty much the same environment. Arizona has over 7 million residents. New Mexico has just over 2. This is another state that went heavy on oil and gas industries. These have paid dividends in previous decades. It's not as profitable as it once was. And it doesn't take as many people to run a plant or do whatever they have to do to get it out of the ground as it used to. On top of that, it's a very unstable industry. Just like Oklahoma, when it's booming, it's great. When it ain't booming, it ain't great. One of the fastest growing industries in New Mexico is bail bondsmen and lawyers, like accident attorneys, I guess. So what could turn New Mexico around? First thing is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Get another couple baskets if you need to. Relying on so much oil and gas is definitely putting all your eggs in one basket. If New Mexico could invest in and develop other industries like tech and renewable energies, it can create more stable and varied job opportunities. They do have some great universities, but their K through 12, that's a little, below average most years. They need to focus a little more on that, get more people to graduate, which of course means pouring more money into the schools, which they never want to do because they don't see it paying off right away. 17.6% of New Mexico lives below the poverty line, and their poorest county is Guadalupe County, where 44% of their population lives below the poverty line. Number 3, West Virginia. What's surprising here is it's moved up from number 2. It's now number 3. Congratulations, West Virginia. You're doing better. It's no secret I'm biased towards West Virginia. I love this state. I pray someday they have, find rare earth elements or something. Whatever they're looking for, they need to find it in the ground in West Virginia. This state needs things to break their way. They need a good roll of the dice. However you want to look at it, they need better opportunities and they need some luck on their side. They've been just pounded by bad luck over the decades. Wonderful people, beautiful land, amazing history, tons of bad luck. West Virginia's economic struggles are pretty much deep-rooted, largely tied to the historical reliance on coal mining. For decades, coal was king in West Virginia, providing jobs and driving the local economy. But as the world began shifting towards cleaner energies, demand for coal dropped, like we talked about before. And when, you're living in a small town where 75% of the people work in some way, shape, or form with the coal industry, it devastates communities. And that happened in many small towns in West Virginia. So what do you do to fix West Virginia's problems? You got to do a lot of things. I think, in just my own personal opinion, I'm not an economist, I'm not a politician, I think they need to really focus on the ecotourism. Get more people into that state to enjoy the outdoors because they've got plenty of that. I honestly think West Virginia is like one YouTube video away from turning things around. It's going to take some viral video showing what a beautiful state this is and all the things you could do outdoors here that's going to make it catch on. It's going to catch fire. I mean, look what happened with avocado toast. Someone made a short video on that. Next thing you know, it was all the craze. But of course, there is a dark side to viral videos. That's how we got Justin Bieber. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good one, that if they just focused on the ecotourism, more than they already are, start paying influencers to make videos about the place. That'll cost you next to nothing, and I think it could pay dividends in a short amount of time. Is that the long-term solution? Who knows? But right now, 18% of West Virginia's population lives below the poverty line. The poorest county is McDowell County, with 53% of their population living below the poverty line. Number 2, Louisiana. I know this video's been kind of a tour of the South, but that's kind of their thing. The South is always, kind of excelled in poverty, and it's too bad. And we get back to what I said in the beginning. It's really not the people as much as it's who they're electing. And I don't think it's always corruption. I think a lot of it is stubbornness. The South kind of is stubborn and changing their ways. Louisiana is a perfect example. The state has a long history of economic challenges, partly due to its reliance on industries like oil and agriculture. And they've kind of been in the mentality that it's got us this far, might as well stick with it. Now, of course, the poverty isn't just related to, bad business choices or politicians. They've had some really bad luck too, like West Virginia. West Virginia got hit with the ending the coal industry. they've been hit by hurricanes that have just devastated this state. I mean, Hurricane Katrina set them back decades. Hurricane Katrina hit almost 20 years ago, and the long-term impacts on infrastructure and housing still play a part in day-to-day life in Louisiana. Not just New Orleans, the entire state. What can they do to fix it? I have no idea. I mean, they focus a lot on their tourism with New Orleans and cruise ships coming out of there. They call it the sportsman's paradise. I don't know how much money that brings in. One thing they do have is New Orleans. New Orleans, it's a draw. I mean, it's a nightmare of a city, but it is definitely a draw. My opinion, I think one of the first things they should do is really clean up New Orleans. Crime, everything. Just fix it. Put as much focus as you can on that. That'll bring in conventions, that'll bring in tourism, and build out from there. Right now in Louisiana, 18.2% of their population lives below the poverty line, and their poorest county, which they call parishes, is East Carroll Parish, and that's 51% of their population lives below the poverty line. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link for that down below. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Mississippi. That's right, our old friend Mississippi has made the list once again. I think last time we did this back in 2021, they were number 3. Now they're moving back up to number 1. Congratulations, you're consistent. This is another state that went all in on farming, especially cotton. And this goes all the way back before the Civil War. Eventually, cotton really wasn't paying the bills. With all that cotton money coming in for decades and decades, they continued to not really focus on education or any other industries. Now, I know a lot of you are going, well, that was like 60, 70, 100 years ago, whatever. It takes generations to catch back up with the rest of the country that's been focusing on education and different industries this whole time. As we talked about in this video and other videos, if you don't have an educated workforce ready to go, a lot of companies won't set up shop in your state. And that's one of Mississippi's biggest problems. So what can Mississippi do to turn it around? First of all, they got to look at the education situation. Better schools and more job training can help people get ready for all sorts of jobs, not just farm work. And speaking of jobs, bringing in different kinds of industries would be a game changer for this state. They've done it a little bit, but not nearly what they need to do. Mississippi also has problems with racial inequality. I mean, there's a few states that do. Mississippi's like the poster child of that. That's something else they need to address before they could really move forward as a state and turn things around. Right now, 19.1% of Mississippi lives below the poverty line. Their poorest county is Holmes County, where 51% of the population lives below the poverty line. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.